Hello, YouTube.com. Welcome to Saint Riot on the Big Net. And I went ahead and loaded up on some invasion content. I went ahead and did some invasions like a crazy person this last week, because I knew this week I'd be playing Final Fantasy XVI like a crazy person. And that is what has happened. And I did a video similar to what I'm about to do today. I've done it before, where I basically just like review a game that I'm currently playing and show you all some Elden Ring invasion content. And I don't like, it drives me crazy, like backseating and spoiling in video games and stuff like that if I'm trying to play it. Some people don't care. I don't want to know nothing, alright? If the game's going to trick me, if the game's going to whatever, if I'm too stupid to understand something, if I don't figure something out the right way, that's fine. I'm cool with that. I would rather fail and suck on my own terms and then figure out what I've done wrong and then have that aha moment. So anyway, point is, if you're like me, and that's what you do when you play video games, maybe you'll enjoy this little review. Maybe you just want to hear a review of the game and you don't really care whether or not they're spoilers, but for some reason you know who I am and you're watching this video. Alternatively, maybe you just want to see some Elden Ring invasions where some cool stuff happens. Well, you're going to see that here. That's going to happen. Okay, Final Fantasy XVI. Let me preface this by saying the Final Fantasy games that I enjoy are like 1 through 9. I like all of those games. I did not like Final Fantasy X. The combat and everything was fine. The character building, the grid system, that was fine. I just didn't care for the story at all. I hated it. Didn't care for most of the characters. Just not my thing. This was right around the time Kingdom Hearts was coming out, and it just became very apparent that Kingdom Hearts was sort of the direction that the games were going to go in from that point on. A little time later, we got Final Fantasy XII, which was a little bit of a departure from that and more towards the things that I liked. But there was, like, you could tell it wasn't what it was supposed to be. The reason Final Fantasy XII wasn't what it was supposed to be was because the guy that was the director of the game, Yasumi Matsuno, who created my favorite Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy Tactics. That's the best one. That's the best Final Fantasy game. Halfway through development of the game, he quit for several reasons. A bunch of people at Square Enix left, including a lot of his team that was working on the game, and also he was sick. Needless to say, the game didn't turn out exactly as it was expected to. It's still a good game, but Final Fantasy Tactics is the best one. Alright, now let's skip ahead. Okay, the guy who is producing Final Fantasy XVI, the reason he works in video games is because he loved Tactics Ogre so much. Yasumi Matsuno, again. It was his dream to work with this guy. Alright, if that's your dream, and that's why you get into making video games, there's a good chance you're going to make a video game that I like. Yasumi Matsuno, obviously, I feel like underrated completely. I mean, the dude is like, to me, he's like Kojima. Like, he can do no wrong. He's never made anything bad. And like, from a director's standpoint, he's just incredible. But that's just me. Yoshi P loves this guy, wants to work with him. Yoshi P, famous for Final Fantasy XIV. I can't play that. I can't play MMORPGs. They're bad for me. I just get addicted to that stuff too quick. But I've never heard anything bad about Final Fantasy XIV. Everybody seems to love it. So when Yoshi P gets a chance to create a mainline Final Fantasy game, I'm on board. I want to check it out. I'll see see what happens. And I played the demo. It's great. I read the interviews. Everything sounds promising. And then I play the game. All right. I played the game. I'm not done with it, so I'm not going to comment on the story of the game. I'm just going to say that so far it's enjoyable and I like it. Someone referred to Final Fantasy XVI as Final Fantasy Tactics Revengeance. And if those words mean anything to you, it's perfect. That's what it is. It's Final Fantasy Tactics Revengeance. First and foremost, a lot of people have said that the open world is, it's not like old school Final Fantasies where you like have this big open world map and you can just go explore. It's not like that. And so people think that people feel like it's too linear. Again, my favorite Final Fantasy, the best one in my opinion, is Final Fantasy Tactics. And so, you know, open world means nothing to me. Linearity in the storyline means nothing to me. None of that matters to me, personally. If that's, I'm not saying that it shouldn't to you, but if it's a make or break deal, the fact that you can go walk around in the open world and fight random battles and stuff, if that's something that you have to have for a game to be Final Fantasy, you know, this one doesn't have that. But what it does have is just the craziest combat system in a Final Fantasy game, I think, by far. It is just straight up Devil May Cry, Dragon's Dogma, applied to a Final Fantasy game. You will notice as you watch these invasions that most of my builds are a guy who has a straight sword in his hand and then uses magic in the other hand. And that is what Final Fantasy XVI is. It's that, the video game. So, I cannot help but feel that this game was just created for me specifically. You know, like it's just perfect. Devil May Cry, except replace Dante's gun with Final Fantasy magic spells. And then you get to do all kinds of cool air combos, and then you get special abilities very similar to Devil May Cry, or I'm sorry, maybe Devil May Cry, but to me, Dragon's Dogma. And that's because the guy who worked on Devil May Cry and Dragon's Dogma is the combat director of Final Fantasy XVI, so it feels like those two games to me. I played Dragon's Dogma because everyone kept telling me it was so great, and when it was announced that this guy was going to be the Final Fantasy XVI combat director, I thought, okay, it's time for me to give this a shot, and so I did. A quick aside. This invasion right here, I'm gonna be nice to the host, and you know, Nice Joey. Nice Joey makes his return. We love Nice Joey! He's so nice! Nice Joey returns for one reason, and one reason in particular. This host's name is Tiny Nuggins, which is a joke. Not a joke, it's a reference to a TV show that like 15 other people are going to, you know, recognize. It's from season 5 of the television show Community, which is an underrated season, in my personal opinion. It's an episode where the gang plays Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the characters is named Tiny Nuggins. And no one is going to remember that. You know what I'm saying? There's like 15 people on this planet right now who could tell you where Tiny Nuggins comes from. And so the fact that this guy's name was Tiny Nuggins, I just immediately wanted to be nice to him. Having said that, I do have the Phantom doesn't have a cool name. That's not a reference that I understand. So, you know, it is what it is. Okay, so the rest of this video, I think, is just me and Tiny Nuggins hanging out. So enjoy that. I think there's another invasion where I have to kill the Phantom again. And there might be another invasion in between those, but it doesn't matter. Alright, so Final Fantasy 16. Combat. It rules. It's a guy with a sword in one hand and magic in the other hand. That's perfect. The story is, to me, good, but I have not finished it yet, so I won't say whether or not, you know. But everything I've played up until this point has been great. The characters, the voice actors, all that stuff is top-notch. Final Fantasy 16 is a game that understands what is wrong with a Joss Whedon script. Everyone can't be the snarky smartass. You just can't do it, okay? And so there's one snarky smartass in the game, and he's great at it. That character is great at it, but it never feels like everybody is in a constant battle of banter and, you know, witty quips to the point where you don't want to hear any of them talk anymore. You have it. It's just one character. There's just one guy, and he's like that. The other characters are their own thing. And it works well. It works great. The characters are all really cool, really fun. The magic system, really cool, really fun. The summons, which are that's a thing in Final Fantasy. A lot of people will see someone talk about Final Fantasy, or they come into my stream, I'm playing it, and they're like, hey, is this a good one to start with? Yes, but that's true for none of them are connected in any way unless they are called, like, for example, Final Fantasy 13 1, Final Fantasy 13 2, Final Fantasy 13 3, Final Fantasy 10, Final Fantasy 10 2. Those are connected, obviously, but like there's no connection that has to be seen between Final Fantasy 6 and Final Fantasy 7, or Final Fantasy 7 and 8, 8 and 9, so forth and so on. Just all of the games share a theme, and the theme is big magic crystals, and then later on, or very early on, but later on, I think around Final Fantasy 3, maybe 2 or 3, a little later on, these monsters that you can summon that have some sort of relationship to the big magic crystals. So you've got big magic crystals, a world in danger, summon monsters, and that's all you need. That's Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 16 has all of those. Is this a good place to start? Sure, but that's true of any Final Fantasy. You don't have to start at any particular one. You can start wherever you want. They're all different. And they have constantly been moving towards this idea of a more action focused game since, like, between Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 4, there's like a difference in how much like focused on the game the action is. Or I'm sorry, how focused on the action the game is. Apologies there. They've constantly been sort of trying to like one up, and get better at being an action game. A game where there's not as much time spent looking at words and selecting stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as a game or as game design. I love those games. But it's just clear, and always has been, that it was important to Final Fantasy that it constantly be trying to find a way to be more focused on action in the moment rather than pausing and looking at screens and looking at words and scrolling through items. They have constantly tried to take steps to make the game faster and more, action focused. And Final Fantasy 16 is just like the culmination of that. I've seen people compare Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake. To me, they are very different. They are both action games, don't get me wrong, but Final Fantasy 7 Remake is more like, and there's nothing wrong with this, I enjoyed it, but it's a busy simulator. It's just letting your ADHD ass mash buttons until it's your turn to look on the menus and then pick, the word you want. That's what it really is, There's nothing wrong with that. I liked it. I enjoyed it. But this is different from that. This is like a game where you actually like press buttons and learn combos. If you want to, you don't have to. You can just play the game. But there are moments, I will say, I'm far enough in the game, that there are moments where it is important that you'll have to show the game that you have been working on the combos and stuff, or the game will sort of punish you for being slow. But having said that, there's all these like accessibility and difficulty options that you have available to you. There's like famously like some rings and stuff that you can equip that make it easier to do combos. The rings will heal for you, stuff like that. So, you're not necessarily punished, but you're punished if you want to be. If you want to experience that level of difficulty, it's there in the game. Alright, now, if you have, if you know me, and you've been watching my channel for a long time, one of the very first things you knew about me, outside of the fact that I like Invasions, was probably that I love the Final Fantasy soundtracks. you probably picked up that I loved the Final Fantasy games because I use their soundtracks in everything. Just most of my videos will feature some sort of Final Fantasy soundtrack at some point or another. The soundtrack of this game is incredible, and the fact that Nobuo Uematsu was the guy at Final Fantasy for so long at Square, and now we're at this point where people are starting to take that role and be like the Final Fantasy composer. I'm not going to say anything bad about any of the other ones because I'll be honest, I don't know them. But if they're making music for a Square Enix Final Fantasy game, I'm sure they're good. I'm sure they're talented. But having said that, the soundtrack for Final Fantasy 16, made by, I believe his name is Soken. I hope that's right. I might have mispronounced it, but you know, I'm sure he can live with it. He's incredible. The soundtrack is absolutely fire from start to finish. It's so good. Like, it's just bangers after bangers. And there's a lot of moments where he sort of like pays homage to Nobuo Uematsu. There are moments where he does that, and then, you know, for the most part, he's just willing to do his own thing and be so good at it, and it fits the game and it fits everything so well. And that is, I think, like, pretty much Final Fantasy 16, like, as a review, period. It does a job of being a Final Fantasy game, and it does a good job of paying homage to the older games that came before it, the ones that like set up, you know, the franchise as like this, you know, mega monolith in all the video games. They do that. They very clearly, like, you know, tip their hat to those things. But at the same time, they are not focused on staying within any sort of parameters that those things built, and they are willing to just do their own thing. And it's, to me, that is exactly what you would want out of a modern Final Fantasy. Like, they just killed it. You know, when I was a kid, me and my friends used to sit around and we would talk about like what would be the best Final Fantasy game. And we had these ideas for like, what if you could control the summon monsters? What if you actually took over the summons and you played as them when you summoned them? What if every attack you did was a limit break, but like you could control it? You could control what happened during the limit break. You know, one of these days, this game is just going to be a cutscene, but you get to play the whole cutscene, you know? And, like, that's just what Final Fantasy 16 is. And again, I haven't finished the game yet. I'm a good ways into it. But I'm not going to comment on anything that I'm not for sure on. As an example, the developers, the producers, the directors, they've talked about how New Game Plus is a big deal in this game, but I've not made it that far yet, so I'm not going to comment on it. I am looking forward to trying it out, because if it's as good as they made it sound, it would be great. I'm not going to comment on, you know, a lot of like late game bosses or anything, because I'm not there yet. But I will say that all the bosses that I have fought at this point have all just been so much fun. It's just constantly me saying, this is badass. Like, if you want to go watch me stream, I've, you know, on my Twitch channel, I have the VODs of me streaming saved, if you would like to watch me play it. But it's literally just me playing for 10 hours a day, every day, saying, this is badass, for 10 hours. That's it. That's my review. This is badass. I love it so much. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching it. Shout out to Tiny Nuggins. I'll see you next time. Until then, later, y'all.